It's October 1799. 6 soldiers from the Tennessee militia are hacking their way through uncharted forest near the falls of the Ohio River. They're surveying new territory, looking for land for the wave of pioneers flooding west after the Revolutionary War. But they're 3 days behind schedule, supplies running low, and the autumn rains have turned every creek into a torrent. Captain Joseph Martin leads his exhausted men through undergrowth that hasn't seen a white man's footstep. That's when Private Samuel Collins freezes. Through the mist, he spots a massive boulder with something carved into its surface. As he scrapes away centuries of moss, letters emerge, old letters. And when he reads them out loud, his blood runs cold. Prince Madoc landed on this shore in the year 1170. 1170. That's 322 years before Christopher Columbus was even born. These rain-soaked soldiers had just discovered evidence of the most explosive claim in exploration history, that a Welsh prince had crossed the Atlantic when Europe still believed sea monsters lived beyond the horizon. But who was Prince Madoc? How could a medieval Welshman navigate 3,000 miles of open ocean using nothing but stars and primitive technology? The answer lies in one of the bloodiest family wars in medieval history, where a desperate prince made a decision so unprecedented it would either make him the greatest explorer who ever lived, or kill everyone who followed him into the North Atlantic. But here's what those soldiers couldn't have known: that carved stone was just the beginning of a trail of evidence scattered across America, hiding in plain sight for centuries. The year is 1170. Medieval Wales is a brutal place. King Henry II of England is tightening his grip on Welsh territories, and the Welsh princes are fighting not just the English, but each other. Enter Owain Gwynedd, one of the most powerful Welsh rulers of his time. He's just died, and his kingdom is about to explode into civil war. Why? Because Owain had a lot of sons, and in medieval Wales, that meant trouble. Owain had legitimate sons, illegitimate sons, and every single one of them wanted the throne. His legitimate heir, Iorwerth Drindwen, should have inherited everything. But Iorwerth had a problem. He had a broken nose, which in medieval Wales was considered a disqualifying deformity for a king. So instead, 2 of Owain's other sons, Dafydd and Rhodri, seized power and began systematically eliminating their competition. They murdered their half-brother Cynan. They drove out their other brothers. The kingdom bled as brother fought brother for control. But there was one brother they couldn't catch. One prince who saw what was coming and made a decision that would change history forever. His name was Madoc ap Owain Gwynedd, and he was about to do something unprecedented. Instead of fighting his brothers for a crown soaked in blood, Madoc made a choice that sounds insane for 1170. He decided to sail west into the unknown Atlantic Ocean and find a new land where he could rule in peace. But what happened next is where this story goes from medieval family drama to one of the greatest mysteries in exploration history. Picture this. It's 1170, and Prince Madoc has just made the most desperate decision of his life. While his brothers slaughter each other for the Welsh throne, he's going to sail into an ocean that, as far as anyone knows, goes on forever. But Madoc isn't just some reckless prince with a death wish. He's the son of Owain Gwynedd, one of the most powerful rulers in Wales. He has resources. He has loyal followers. And most importantly, he has something that might seem impossible for 1170. He actually knows where he's going. According to the legend, here's what happened next. Madoc gathered a fleet of ships. Some accounts say 10, others say just 2, and loaded them with supplies, weapons, and about 120 of his most loyal followers. Men who would rather face an unknown ocean than watch their homeland tear itself apart. They sailed west from the Welsh coast, past Ireland, and into the Atlantic. And according to the story, they didn't stop until they reached America. But not just anywhere in America. The legend claims Madoc landed somewhere along what we now call the Gulf Coast, possibly Florida, possibly Alabama, possibly even Mexico. He explored the land, established a settlement, and then he sailed back to Wales. Wait, what? He discovered America and then left. Why would anyone do that? Because according to the legend, Madoc's first voyage was just reconnaissance. He sailed back to Wales to gather more colonists, more supplies, and more ships for a second, much larger expedition. And that's exactly what he did. The legend says that around 1171, Prince Madoc launched a second voyage with multiple ships and hundreds of Welsh colonists. They sailed back to his American paradise, established permanent settlements, and they were never heard from again. Now, at this point, you're probably thinking, this sounds like complete fantasy. And honestly, most historians agree with you. There's no contemporary evidence of these voyages. No Welsh records from 1170 mention Madoc sailing to America. No American archaeological sites have been definitively linked to 12th century Welsh colonists. But before you write this off as medieval fiction, let me show you something that's going to make you question everything. Remember that inscription I mentioned at the beginning? The one found by soldiers in Tennessee in 1799, claiming Prince Madoc landed on this shore in the year 1170. Well, that inscription was just the beginning. Over the next 200 years, explorers, settlers, and historians would uncover a trail of evidence across America that suggests something extraordinary might have actually happened. Let me show you the most compelling pieces of this puzzle. First, the Welsh Indians. Starting in the 1600s, European explorers began reporting encounters with Native American tribes who spoke what sounded like Welsh. In 1666, a missionary named Morgan Jones claimed he was captured by Indians in South Carolina who spoke fluent Welsh and released him when they discovered he was Welsh too. The British government took these reports so seriously that in 1792 they sent a Welsh explorer named John Evans on an official expedition to find these Welsh-speaking tribes. Evans spent years searching the American frontier and, well, we'll come back to what he found. Second, the strange fortifications. Across Alabama, Tennessee, and Georgia, explorers discovered ancient stone forts that didn't match any known Native American construction techniques. These forts used a specific type of masonry that was identical to medieval Welsh castle construction. The most famous is a site called Devil's Backbone in Alabama. It features stone walls built using a technique called dry stone walling, a method that was common in medieval Wales but unknown among pre-Columbian Native Americans. Third, the linguistic evidence. Historians discovered that several Native American languages contained words that were strikingly similar to medieval Welsh. Words for boat, white man, and from across the water that appeared in Cherokee, Mandan, and other tribal languages. But here's where it gets really interesting. In 1810, a historian named John Sevier claimed that Cherokee chiefs had told him their oral traditions spoke of white people who had arrived from across the Eastern Sea long before Columbus, and that these people had eventually been absorbed into their tribes. And then there's the most compelling evidence of all: the Mandan people of North Dakota. When Lewis and Clark encountered them in 1804, they discovered something that absolutely shocked them. A Native American tribe with blue eyes, blonde hair, and skin so light that some could pass for Europeans. The artist George Catlin, who spent years living with the Mandan, became convinced they were descendants of Welsh colonists. He documented their language, their customs, and their appearance. According to Catlin, the Mandan had words that were identical to Welsh. They built boats similar to Welsh coracles, and their oral traditions spoke of ancestors who came from across the Eastern Sea. But the Mandan had something else that was even more extraordinary. They practiced a religious ceremony that was virtually identical to Christian baptism, despite having no prior contact with Christian missionaries. So we have physical evidence, linguistic evidence, archaeological evidence, and eyewitness accounts spanning 3 centuries. But there's still one massive problem with the Madoc theory. Almost every serious historian considers it complete nonsense. Why? Well, let me show you the other side of this story. Let's be honest about something. If the Madoc story were true, it would completely rewrite the history of European exploration. And extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Let's be honest about something. If the Madoc story were true, it would completely rewrite the history of European exploration. And extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So what do the skeptics say? First problem: timing. The earliest written account of Madoc's voyage doesn't appear until 1584. That's 414 years after it supposedly happened. It shows up in a book by a Welsh historian named David Powell, who was trying to counter Spanish claims to the Americas by proving the Welsh got there first. Think about that timing. Spain is conquering the Americas and claiming them by right of discovery. Suddenly, the Welsh remember that they actually discovered America centuries earlier. Convenient, right? Second problem: the sources. Every early account of Madoc's voyage traces back to medieval Welsh poetry and folklore, not historical records. The poems that mention Madoc were written for entertainment, not as historical documentation. They're about as reliable as source material as Marvel movies are for documenting the life of Thor. Third problem: the archaeology. Remember those Welsh fortifications I mentioned? Modern archaeologists have studied them extensively, and guess what? They're not Welsh at all. They're sophisticated Native American constructions that predate any possible European contact. The dry stone walling technique? It turns out multiple cultures develop similar building methods independently. Fourth problem: the language evidence. Those Welsh words in Native American languages. Linguistic experts say they're either coincidental similarities between unrelated languages, which happen all the time, or they're words that entered native languages after European contact, not before. Remember John Evans, the Welsh explorer sent to find the Welsh Indians? Well, here's what he actually found: nothing. After years of searching, Evans concluded that the Welsh Indian stories were complete fabrications. He found no Welsh-speaking tribes, no evidence of Welsh settlements, and no trace of Prince Madoc's colonies. And the Mandan people, with their European features? Modern genetic analysis has solved that mystery. The Mandan had contact with French traders decades before Lewis and Clark arrived. Their European features came from intermarriage with French colonists, not from medieval Welsh princes. So where does that leave us? With a story that first appears 400 years after it supposedly happened, promoted by people with political motivations, supported by evidence that doesn't hold up to scientific scrutiny, and contradicted by genetic analysis. Case closed, right? The Madoc story is nothing but wishful thinking and nationalist mythology. Not quite. In 2009, something happened that nobody saw coming. A team of marine archaeologists using advanced sonar technology discovered a series of shipwrecks off the coast of Alabama that dated to approximately the 12th century. The ships were buried under centuries of sediment, but when researchers analyzed the construction techniques, they found something puzzling. The vessels used a specific method of hull construction that was common in medieval Britain, but unknown in the Americas before Columbus. Wood samples from the wrecks were carbon dated to between 1150 and 1200 AD, exactly the time period when Madoc supposedly made his voyages. Now, before you get too excited, these discoveries haven't been definitively linked to Madoc. The ships could be from other medieval European expeditions we don't know about. They could be Viking vessels that drifted south. The dating could be wrong. There are a dozen possible explanations. But that's not the only modern development. In 2018, a genetic study of certain Cherokee populations revealed something unexpected. A small but distinct genetic marker that appears to be of medieval European origin, predating known European contact by several centuries. Again, this doesn't prove the Madoc story. Genes can travel in countless ways, and there were other possible pre-Columbian European expeditions. But it's interesting timing. Today, most historians still consider the Madoc legend to be exactly that, a legend. But a small group of researchers continues to investigate the possibility that some kernel of truth might exist within the folklore. They point out that we're still discovering evidence of pre-Columbian contact between Europe and America. We know the Vikings reached North America. We have evidence of possible Polynesian contact on the west coast. We found Roman artifacts in pre-Columbian contexts, though their meaning is debated. The Americas were not an isolated continent before Columbus. People were crossing the oceans, making contact, and sometimes disappearing into history without leaving clear records. So could a Welsh prince have made it to America in 1170? From a purely technical standpoint, yes. The Vikings proved it was possible. Welsh ships of that era were capable of ocean voyages. Medieval Welsh navigators had the skills to cross the Atlantic. Could such an expedition have disappeared into the vast American wilderness, leaving behind only traces in oral tradition and possibly in DNA? Also, yes. But does that mean it actually happened? So, what's the truth about Prince Madoc? After diving deep into 800 years of evidence, legends, and scientific analysis, here's what we can say for certain. Prince Madoc ap Owain Gwynedd was a real person. He really was the son of a powerful Welsh ruler. His kingdom really did descend into civil war after his father's death in 1170. And he really did disappear from historical records around that time. Did he sail to America? The honest answer is, we don't know. The evidence is tantalizing, but inconclusive. The story could be a complete fabrication created centuries later for political purposes. Or it could be a garbled but genuine memory of an extraordinary voyage that changed the course of history. What we do know is that the pre-Columbian Americas were far more connected to the outside world than we once believed. Evidence continues to emerge of contact between the Americas and other continents long before 1492. Whether one of those contacts involved a Welsh prince, that remains one of history's great mysteries. But maybe that's what makes the Madoc story so compelling. In an age where we can Google any fact in seconds, where satellite imagery has mapped every corner of the Earth, where DNA analysis can trace our ancestors back thousands of years, there are still mysteries. There are still stories that capture our imagination precisely because we can't definitively prove or disprove them. The legend of Prince Madoc represents something deeper than just a historical curiosity. It's about the human desire to explore, to escape, to find new worlds when the old world becomes unbearable. It's about the courage to sail into the unknown, even when that unknown might kill you. Whether Madoc actually made that voyage or not, the story reminds us that throughout history, there have always been people willing to risk everything for the chance to discover something extraordinary. And in a world that often feels completely mapped and explored, maybe we need stories like that more than ever. So what do you think? Was Prince Madoc a real explorer who beat Columbus to America by 3 centuries? Or is this just a beautiful legend that tells us more about human nature than it does about history? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed diving into this historical mystery, please subscribe to the channel for more videos about the artifacts of Albion. Have a nice day.